And I thank Philips for organizing this webinar as part of their series of webinars on echocardiography. And the topic is echocardiography in cardiac masses. So this is an exciting topic because for the people who are starting to do echocardiogram, whenever they see a mass inside the cardiac chambers, they become excited. So, and they try to diagnose whether it is a tumor or a thrombus or a vegetation or whatever it is. So that is an exciting topic. So we'll go ahead with the presentation. And first, I'm going to show you a few cases which I'm not going to describe. So you have to write your own diagnosis. At the end of the lecture, I'll again discuss the same cases, and you can compare with your findings and then give yourself mark. So this is the first case. So there is a mass here. So what is the diagnosis? What is the type of mass which is seen there, and what has happened to the heart? This is the first patient. I'll show you the entire clip. Take a piece of paper and write it down. This is the apical four-chamber view, which we are seeing, and we have added color, and you'll see the continuous wave Doppler also. So you have to write what is the mass which we are seeing and why it has happened in this patient. What is the basic diagnosis because of which that has happened. So this is the first case. This is the second one. This is the transesophageal echocardiogram. This is the left atrium at the short axis view. So this is actually say upper esophageal short axis cut. Usually around 45 degrees you will get this view. 38 degrees it shows actually. And this is the left atrium. This is the right atrium. This is the aorta. And this is the interatrial septum for those of you who want to refresh the anatomy. So left atrium, right atrium, and interatrial septum, and you see some mass here. So what is the nature of the mass? What is the diagnosis in this patient? Hope all of you have written your answers. We'll go to the next case. So this is the parasternal long axis view in another patient. So you can see the RV, interventricular septum, and the left ventricle. This is the aortic valve and the left atrium. This is the mitral valve, and you see a mass here. So what is the mass? What is this mass? This is the third clip which I am showing. And this is the fourth one. This is again the parasternal long axis view. You see a mass inside the left atrium, which is prolapsing into the mitral valve. See the clip in its entirety up to the end and write your diagnosis. And we have added color also. This is the last one. So this is the apical four-chamber view. You can see a mass near the left ventricular apex. This is the apical long axis view. And again, the clip is again running. So what is the diagnosis in this patient, the type of mass, and what is the say clinical condition which has produced the mass? So these are the 5 clips which I have shown. After we finish the lectures, we will again go through the clips and the answers. You can see whether you are able to diagnose it before. If you are able to diagnose all the 5 before, then you are an expert. You need not even attend this lecture. If you are able to say tell all the things after that, at least after the lecture, I will be happy that you have learned something from the webinar. So the cardiac mass is an abnormal structure within the cardiac chambers. So it may be present inside the left ventricle, right ventricle, left atrium or right atrium. Sometimes it may be present inside the veins, so superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava or even the pulmonary vein, or it may be present inside the pulmonary artery or inside the aorta. So all these masses, any masses of any shape, it is called a cardiac mass. We call it as a cardiac mass. It is attached to the cardiac structures, either to the valves or to the wall of the ventricles or the atrium or the wall of the great arteries and the veins. And some of the masses are immediately adjacent to the heart. They are not exactly inside the heart. They are just outside the heart and producing some abnormalities, say inside the flow or some problem in the cardiac structure. So this is what is called a cardiac mass. This cardiac mass can be divided into tumors, vegetations, thrombus. These are the 3 most important things. And there's sometimes we see masses inside the heart due to artifacts or due to normal structures which are present inside the heart, or sometimes after surgery, etc. There are some abnormal echoes inside the heart, which you may mistake it for say cardiac mass, say a true cardiac mass. So these also have to be identified correctly so that you won't start any unnecessary treatment. Whenever you see a mass, the first thing is you have to be sure that it is a mass first. Then see whether it has, what is the number of masses which are present, what is the size of the mass, what are the shape, location, mobility, attachment, and extension. So all these characteristics of the mass has to be identified. Then, is there any mass-related stenosis or regurgitation of the valves? Is there any contractile dysfunction of the left ventricle or the right ventricle? Is there pericardial involvement in the form of effusion, or is it producing tamponade, etc. have to be identified. Apart from identifying the mass, you have to see whether there is any basic structural heart disease, whether the patient has got a congenital heart disease or an acquired valvular heart disease, or is there a myocardial disease or a myocardial infarction. So all these structural heart diseases should be identified. And this can be easily identified by looking at the echocardiogram. Then some of the cases, we may not be able to come to a definite conclusion. Then we have to follow up the mass and identify whether it is decreasing in size or increasing in size so that we can be sure about the mass. Whenever the echocardiography is the first basic investigation which is useful for identifying the cardiac masses. If you are still not sure about the nature of the mass, then we can do further investigation like CT angiogram or a MRI or a PET scan. So all these scans can be done to identify the mass. Apart from transthoracic echocardiogram, other types of echocardiography also are useful, especially the transesophageal echocardiogram is very useful in certain types of masses. The contrast echocardiography also can be used for identifying the cardiac masses. It can identify the blood flow pattern inside the cardiac mass. It can identify whether it is an artifact or a true mass present inside the ventricles, etc. These can be identified by contrast echocardiogram. Sometimes we can even do a 3-dimensional echocardiogram, but the utility of 3-dimensional echocardiogram is little limited, except for assessing the size or the inner structure of the mass, etc. We can use the 3-dimensional echocardiogram. First, we will take up cardiac tumors, which is the most important one. And the cardiac tumors are very rare. It is present in about 0.1% of the cases which we see. The commonest type of cardiac tumor is the metastatic tumors. So the secondary occurring inside the heart is the most common cardiac tumor. Primaries actually are rare. It is about, say, 1/4 or 1/5 of the tumors is formed by the primaries. The primary cardiac tumors can be again divided into benign and malignant. So as I said, cardiac metastasis from malignant tumors is one of the important tumors which occur inside the heart. It is 20 to 40 times more than the primary cardiac tumors. I told it wrongly, I think 1/4 and all that. So it is 20 to 40 times more common. It is the secondary tumors occurs more commonly with carcinoma than with the sarcoma. Cardiac metastasis occurs in 50% of cases of malignant melanoma, 1/3 of the cases of cancer lung and cancer breast, half of the cases of leukemia, and 1/6 of the case of lymphoma. So the malignancy anywhere inside the body can metastasize to the heart and produce a cardiac mass, except the one which is inside the brain. The central nervous system brain tumors are the one which does not metastasize to other parts of the body. Otherwise, any other part of the body which is affected by malignant tumor can throw secondaries to the various organs, including the heart. Among the benign tumors, myxomas are the commonest one, which all of you must have seen. A myxoma, left atrial myxoma is the most common one. The right atrial myxoma and biatrial myxoma, you can get left ventricular myxoma, right ventricular myxoma, which can occur in certain patients. The second one is the lipoma. Then comes the papillary fibroelastoma, rhabdomyoma. Rhabdomyoma especially is the commonest tumor in children. So if you see a cardiac mass in an echo in a patient about 1 or 2 years old, the first diagnosis you should consider is the rhabdomyoma. The second commonest tumor especially in children is a fibroma. Hemangioma can occur, and also teratomas. There are a number of other tumors which can, benign tumors, which can occur inside the heart. Among the malignant tumors, sarcoma is the most common one. Angiosarcoma, rhabdomyosarcoma, fibrosarcoma, etc. can occur inside the heart. Mesothelioma, lymphoma, and leiomyosarcoma are the other types of primary malignant tumors which can happen inside the heart. This is this person you must be knowing. He is the father of echocardiography, Dr. Ingi Edler. So this is one of his recording of left atrial myxoma. So this is one of the earliest recordings of mode echocardiography of a patient with left atrial myxoma, which he has described. And this is one of our mode echocardiograms, which we from the book which we published in 1981. So this is almost the first case I think we saw. Left atrial myxoma, which is present inside the left atrium during systole and protruding through the mitral valve during diastole. There is a gap between the opening of the anterior mitral leaflet and the mass of echoes which are present behind the mitral valve, indicating that the mass is prolapsing into the mitral valve orifice after a certain interval. Differentiating it from the calcification of the mitral valve, which can confuse you. And this is the typical two-dimensional echocardiogram of a patient with left atrial myxoma. You can see a cauliflower-like mass, a large mass, which is obstructing the mitral valve orifice, almost completely filling the mitral valve orifice. You can see it in the short axis, and also you can see clearly the attachment in the apical four-chamber view. So you can see clearly that the mass is attached to the middle portion of the interatrial septum, and it is protruding through the mitral valve, producing mitral stenosis, and there is some degree of mitral regurgitation also. You can see the gradients are increased, the peak and the mean gradients are increased, and there is a mitral stenosis with regurgitation. In contrast to that previous case, here again we see a mass inside the left atrium. This mass is not attached to the interatrial septum, you can clearly see. And it seems to be arising from the outside. You can see it is entering through one of the pulmonary veins. Clearly here you can see the outside mass, which is entering through the left superior pulmonary vein, and it has entered the left atrium. And this is also mobile. To a certain extent, it is mobile and producing obstruction. This is a mass from a patient with cancer lung, which is extending into the left atrium through one of the pulmonary veins, the left upper lobe pulmonary vein. This is actually a small mass, but it's still very important. You can see a mass inside the right atrium. This is the interatrial septum. This is the apical four-chamber view. This is the subcostal four-chamber view. You can clearly identify the mass attached to the interatrial septum at the level of fossa ovalis. This is actually right atrial myxoma, which is very small, but it is highly mobile. You can see it is highly mobile. It is not producing any obstruction to the valve because it's very small. There is another mass inside the right ventricle. The mass has got a bright central portion, indicating that the mass is calcified. So the calcification of the mass tells you that it should be present, it should have been present for a large number of years, and it is getting calcified. That itself tells you that it is very unlikely to be a malignant one. So here you can see the calcification and the after shadow of the calcification. It is attached to the right ventricular anterior wall. It is extending into the right ventricular inflow tract and also into the right ventricular outflow tract, producing some degree of right ventricular outflow obstruction also. So this we diagnosed it as a case of right ventricular myxoma, and this patient was operated and it was proved to be a right ventricular myxoma. You can see the calcification, inflow portion, the outflow portion of the mass can be clearly identified. There's another mass which is present inside the left ventricle. It is attached to the anterior wall of the left ventricle and it is extending into the left ventricular outflow tract. It is actually highly mobile. It is attached by a thin stalk and it is very highly mobile. It can anytime get embolized and all that. A small portion can get anytime embolized. And this mass we were operated and this was found to be a left ventricular myxoma. Here we have expanded the picture. It is not arising from the septum. It is actually attached to the anterior wall of the left ventricle. Now you can see clearly the attachment in the two-chamber view. There is no evidence of mitral regurgitation, no evidence of aortic valve involvement due to the left ventricular mass. This is another mass which is being tossed up. You can see it is present inside the left atrium. It is getting tossed up by the anterior mitral leaflet. Each time it tries to come through the varus orifice, the anterior mitral leaflet hits it again, pushes it into the left atrium. The mass is attached to the base of the posterior mitral leaflet. This has to be often said, it has to be differentiated from a vegetation. But in this patient, there was no fever, etc. And because of the attachment to the mitral valve, we diagnosed it as a mitral valve myxoma. And this patient, again, surgery was done and the diagnosis was confirmed. So in all these cases of mass, we tried to diagnose what is the type of mass from its attachment, mobility, and and what are the lesions which are producing and all that. So, but the exact histopathology of the tumor mass cannot be diagnosed just from the echocardiogram alone. So for that, we have to remove the mass and analyze it pathologically. Then only we can say definitely this is a myxoma or this is a LV clot, etc. This is another patient with left atrial myxoma. You can see there are some mobile echoes near the tip of the, this mass, and it is highly mobile. The tip of the mass is, more echo dense than the other portions of the mass. This is actually a patient who had a fever and the culture was positive. So this was a left atrial myxoma, most probably with an infected endocarditis with vegetations over the, left atrial myxoma. The mass is mild to moderate in size and it was not producing any obstruction. There was a mild mitral regurgitation present in this patient. And this is another patient with myxoma. There is calcification of the myxoma around the peripheries. You can see spots of calcification around the periphery. The central portion is thin. This mass is more solid than the first case which you saw, which was cauliflower-like. So this mass is a solid tumor which is again attached to the interatrial septum, and the peripheral portion is calcified. So left atrial myxoma can get calcified. They can actually necrose and produce a cavity inside the tumor. Sometimes there can be a hemorrhage into the tumor can occur. All these things can be identified. So this is the transesophageal echocardiogram. Another patient, you can see a cavity in the inside the tumor mass. This is probably due to a tumor necrosis, which is producing echo-free area inside the left atrial myxoma. A large myxoma attached to the lower portion of the interatrial septum. It is not actually middle, but a lower portion of the interatrial septum and producing mitral valve obstruction. That is regarding the myxomas. Now, this is actually there are dense echoes over the interatrial septum. This is a transesophageal echo, left atrium and right atrium. This is the interatrial septum which we are seeing, and you can see a dumbbell-like mass. There is one mass here, another mass here, with an echo-free area in between. At the level of the fossa ovalis, the mass cannot be identified. So this picture is typical of lipodystrophy of the interatrial septum. If the lipodystrophy is marked and produces, say, dense mass of a few centimeters in thickness, then it can be called as a lipoma of the interatrial septum. So here the mass measured almost more than 2 centimeters in thickness, and this is actually a lipoma of the interatrial septum. The only thing is a similar picture can be produced by lymphoma. It can also produce a mass like this attached to the interatrial septum. The difference is lymphoma will produce a dense echo all over the interatrial septum. There won't be any gap at the level of the fossa ovalis. At the level of fossa ovalis also, you can identify the mass. So if the mass is present all over the interatrial septum, including the fossa ovalis, then it is, you have to think in terms of lymphoma. If the fossa ovalis is spared, then you have to think in terms of lipodystrophy or lipoma of the interatrial septum. This is one of the masses inside the left ventricle. This case was actually shared by my colleagues from the Madras Medical College after I got retired. There is a large mass inside the left ventricle, and with the color, you can identify some flow pattern inside the inside the mass. I will again run it. There is a large mass, but it's here it is actually separated. On this side, it is attached to the left ventricular muscle, and you can see some flow pattern. So if you want to clearly make out this flow pattern better, you can even do a contrast echocardiogram which will fill the say mass. This patient was operated. They were able to remove the mass partially. Almost 70% of the mass they have removed, but they were not able to get a cleavage plane between the left ventricular myocardium and this mass. So yeah, they have left a small portion of the mass inside the left ventricle. So this is a patient with hemangioma, left ventricular hemangioma. All of you know what this tumor with the mass is. There is a small mass inside the aorta, and it shows some queering appearance, or as fibrillary movement of the mass is present. So this is what is called a sea anemone appearance of the mass. So this is present usually in patients with papillary fibroelastoma. Papillary fibroelastoma commonly occurs over the mitral valve. It can also occur over the aortic valve, and you can see this papillary fibroelastoma present over the aorta. This case again was shared by my MMC colleagues. So there is a mass. This is a rare one. So this is the transesophageal echocardiogram. This is the aortic valve, left atrium. You can clearly see, identify the left atrial appendage, and this will be the pulmonary vein. So there is a ridge of tissue which separates the left atrial appendage from the left upper lobe pulmonary vein. This is sometimes called as the Warfarin ridge because the tip of the say this ridge is often bulbous, or it is sometimes called as a Q-tip or a Warfarin ridge, etc. Because people used to mistake it for a thrombus and try to resolve that thrombus using warfarin. Here in this patient, you can identify that this mass is about 1.5 centimeters in size. Again, it has got a say soft fibrillary appearance, and this patient was not operated. So the first diagnosis was a papillary fibroelastoma attached to the tissue between the pulmonary vein and the left atrial appendage. Still, it can be myxoma also. So both the conditions have been described in literature. At the final diagnosis, we will know only if we remove the mass from the warfarin ridge. This is a child seen about 2 months of age. Large masses present inside the left atrium, left ventricle, and also the right ventricle. Whenever you see a mass inside the child, the first diagnosis is a rhabdomyoma. So actually, this mass was even diagnosed before in utero. when they did a fetal echo, they found out this mass and they diagnosed it as a rhabdomyoma. You can see this this is producing mild obstruction. You can see the mass inside the left ventricle. There are two masses. There is one here between the junction of the left atrium and the left ventricle, and then another one which is extending into the right ventricle. Whenever you see a rhabdomyoma, you have to look for tuberous sclerosis. The ashy green leaf-like patches over the thigh and the back, you have to see the thing, and there is usually a pineal calcification which is present in these patients. So they have to be investigated for the presence or absence of tuberous sclerosis. It is actually the two ways. Whenever you see a patient with tuberous sclerosis, you have to do an echocardiogram to find out whether there are any masses inside the heart. If there is a mass, then it is likely to be a rhabdomyoma. And whenever there is a rhabdomyoma, on the reverse, you have to look for the presence of tuberous sclerosis. The only thing is sometimes it can produce obstruction and cardiac arrhythmias, in which case it will need surgical removal. Otherwise, there are a number of cases which has been reported in the literature. When they follow up the patient, the tumor actually disappears. I don't have an example of fibroma. Fibroma is the second most common tumor in children. The most important thing in a fibroma is it is actually intramyocardial and it is often calcified. So whenever you see an intramyocardial mass with calcification, sometimes producing arrhythmia, then in children especially, we have to think in terms of fibroma. This is a patient which has This is a patient which we have seen again in our Madras Medical College. There is a large mass occupying the right ventricular inflow tract near the right ventricular apex. It is clear-cut, circumscribed with a clear-cut capsule, and it is multiloculated. There are multiple cysts inside the mass. Here you can see the multiples. This appearance is extremely characteristic of hydatid cyst. Multiple hydatid cysts producing a mass inside the right ventricle. The hydatid cyst sometimes can be single. It can be present inside the left ventricle, right ventricle. It can be present inside the atrium. It can be even present in inside the intra-atrial septum. This is another patient. It's almost the mass looks similar to the previous one. Only thing is here in this patient, it is present inside the left ventricle. And you see here, this patient has got a severe mitral stenosis and a mild aortic regurgitation. So this is again is a patient with hydatid cyst inside the left ventricle with rheumatic mitral stenosis and rheumatic aortic regurgitation. Mitral stenosis is severe and the aortic regurgitation is very mild. Here you can identify a mass inside the right ventricle. This mass, you cannot separate it out from the right ventricular myocardium. It is present inside the inflow tract and also outflow tract, and it is producing a pericardial effusion. Whenever you see a pericardial effusion, you always think in terms of a malignant tumor. So here, this is actually proved to be a sarcoma. They did a biopsy. They could not remove the tumor. So this is a right ventricular sarcoma, which is occupying the inflow tract and also extending into the outflow tract and producing moderate pericardial effusion in this patient. This is again transesophageal echocardiogram. This is the left atrium and this is the right atrium. And you can see a large masses inside the right atrium. So here you can see a large mass inside the right atrium. There are small masses which are floating inside the right atrium. And again, you can see there are multiple masses. Here you can see it is invading the tricuspid annulus and it is narrowing the tricuspid valve orifice. And it is almost, it is not uniform in character. It produces echo-free areas inside the mass itself, indicating that it is destroying the tissue of the muscle of the right atrium. So whenever you see multiple masses, it is likely to be a malignant one. This patient, it was a lymphoma which was invading the right atrium. This patient had a lymphoma of the chest also, inside the chest, and it was extending into the right atrium also. This case, the recording is not so good. We have seen two cases. There's a large pericardial effusion with some amount of cardiac tamponade. You see a mass inside the left atrium. You can see the mass floating into the mitral valve orifice. Whenever you see a large mass with a large pericardial effusion with atrial mass, it is likely to be the angiosarcoma. So we missed actually one of the large masses with the right atrial's angiosarcoma. Actually, this was referred from one of our professors from the Madras Medical College. We diagnosed the say large pericardial effusion. Because of the pericardial effusion, the patient was little sick. We missed the right atrial tumor, right atrial mass. And the patient, they did a pericardiocentesis. Then they did a CT angio, which picked up the right atrial mass. And they presented it in one of the conferences. And that case I cannot forget, because that was a case which we failed to diagnose. So in the next case, left atrial mass with a large pericardial effusion. This case, immediately we were able to diagnose it as an angiosarcoma, and it was proved to be an angiosarcoma. This is again a child, small child, which was referred from the Cancer Institute. So this mass is protruding from the liver, and it is actually going through the capsule of the liver, and it is protruding into the say right atrium. It is near the mouth of the inferior vena cava. This is a hepatocellular carcinoma in a child. This case again was referred from our Cancer Institute, Adyar. This patient was getting treatment for the last 3 or 4 years for leukemia with imatinib, etc. And he developed a cardiac failure, and the patient was referred to us. This is the echocardiographic picture. You can see dense echoes over the right ventricle inside the inflow tract and also the outflow tract. So if you take this picture, this is typical of right ventricular endomyocardial fibrosis. Or it can be another one. The second one is the hypereosinophilic syndrome. So in this patient, it not only involves the inflow tract, it also involves the outflow tract. The outflow tract is never involved in patients with left ventricular endomyocardial fibrosis. You can clearly see the right ventricular outflow tract being, say, there is a dense echoes inside the right ventricular outflow tract. So this rules out endomyocardial fibrosis. This is hypereosinophilic syndrome, or otherwise called as Lafleur syndrome. There are two types, myeloproliferative type and the lymphoproliferative type. This is the one myeloproliferative type due to leukemia. It has produced say a restrictive type of restriction to the flow of the blood inside the right ventricle, and it was producing cardiac failure in this patient. You can see the tricuspid valve is plastered to the right ventricular anterior wall. The right ventricle and the right atrium are behaving like one chamber, and there are dense echoes, and the patient succumbed to the disease finally. This is another patient with the right atrial mass. This is a transthoracic echo. You can see multiple echocardiographic masses inside the right atrium. This is a patient with cancer lung with secondaries inside the right atrium. Whenever you see multiple masses, you have to think only in terms of cardiac metastasis. Whenever you see a mass inside the right atrium, carefully look at the inferior vena cava to see whether there are any masses. Also into the superior vena cava, and sometimes the coronary sinus also, to find out whether it is extending from one of these structures. This is again a mass inside the right atrium. This is again transesophageal echocardiogram, left atrium and the right atrium. A mass is present inside the right atrium and also inside the left atrium, just behind the aorta. We'll come to the bicaval view. You can see the mass is large mass present inside the right atrium. The mass is extending through the superior vena cava. You can see this is the region of the superior vena cava in the bicaval view, and you can clearly see that the mass is extending through the superior vena cava and coming into the right atrium. So this was a patient with thyroid carcinoma, which was extending into the right atrium and the left atrium through the superior vena cava. Another mass inside the right atrium. This mass has a solid appearance. It is very unlikely to be a thrombus, because usually if it is a deep vein thrombosis extending into the right ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle, usually it has got a tadpole-like appearance, a linear cast of the vein itself. Here you can see a dense mass inside the inferior vena cava, which is extending into the right atrium. So this was a renal cell carcinoma which was extending through the inferior vena cava and extending into the right atrium. This patient has got a large pericardial effusion. It is present again all around the heart. You can see the floating heart within the large pericardial effusion, and the patient was having cardiac tamponade. But if you see the right ventricular wall, it is attached to a portion of the tissue outside. So this is the right ventricular wall. So this is actually the invasion of the heart pericardium by metastasis in a patient with cancer lung, which was extending through the pericardium, producing a large pericardial effusion, and also it was involving the right ventricular wall. And actually it is attached, the right ventricular anterior wall is attached to the secondaries and also to the pericardium. Extracardiac masses. Here again you can see a large mass outside the heart. It is compressing the right ventricle outflow tract, and there is a significant gradient across the right ventricular outflow tract. This again turned out to be a lymphoma which was pressing the right ventricular outflow tract and the pulmonary artery, and there is a significant gradient of about 43 millimeters, maximum gradient of 43 millimeters across the right ventricular outflow tract. That's about cardiac masses. Next, we'll go on to the next type of mass, which is vegetation, which is very important for all of us to identify the vegetation. This is one of the famous lectures, the Royal Gustonian lecture given in 1885 by Dr. William Osler. Actually, this is a two-part lecture which was given by Dr. William Osler, and in his words, few diseases present greater difficulties in the way of diagnosis than endocarditis. The protein character of the malady, the latency of the cardiac symptoms, and the close simulation of other disorders combine to render the detection particularly difficult. So we know the clinical manifestation of the infective endocarditis with fever, cardiac murmurs. You can get Osler's notes, rod spots, splinter hemorrhages, etc. But these are less common. The clinical manifestations are less common. It is very difficult to identify, say, whenever a patient is having a prolonged fever for more than 1 week, to say whether the patient has got infective endocarditis or not. Especially if the patient is having a cardiac murmur, it is again mandatory to exclude infective endocarditis in that patient. So echocardiogram is the most ideal method for diagnosing the vegetations. A hallmark of infective endocarditis are two. One is vegetations and the complications of infective endocarditis in the form of valvular destruction, producing regurgitation of the valves. The vegetation consists of clumps of microorganisms with the platelet thrombi, fibrin, and erythrocytes. Commonly, they are present over the mitral valve and also over the aortic valve. This is the hemodecardiogram of a patient with mitral valve endocarditis. You can see dense echoes over the anterior mitral leaflet and the posterior mitral leaflet. Here you can see the posterior mitral leaflet is moving anteriorly during early diastole, indicating that the posterior mitral leaflet is flail. This is a patient with aortic valve endocarditis. You can see the masses over the aortic valve protruding into the left ventricular outflow tract and present in front of the mitral valve. So these are the hemodecardiogram of a patient with mitral valve endocarditis and the aortic valve endocarditis. The detection of hemodecardiogram has been described even in the 1970s. So by hemodecardiogram, usually a larger size vegetation of about 5 millimeters or more usually are identified, and the detection rate is about 30 to 40% of the patient with the vegetations are usually identified by hemodecardiogram. Whereas with the two-dimensional echocardiogram, even vegetations of the size of 2 to 4 millimeters are often picked up by the two-dimensional echocardiogram, and the detection rate is about 60 to 70. With the transesophageal echocardiogram, you can even measure these, you can identify the vegetations of the size of 1 to 2 millimeters, and the detection rate is almost 98 or 99%. So in a patient with infective endocarditis, vegetation in whom you are suspecting presence of thrombus, if you are not able to clearly identify the mass by the transthoracic echocardiogram, you have to proceed with doing a transesophageal echocardiogram. After a proper transesophageal echocardiogram, through say visualizing all the cardiac structures, if you are not able to identify any mass over the valves or over the chambers, then the likelihood of infective endocarditis decreases. And you wait for 2 weeks and then repeat the transthoracic echocardiogram and the transesophageal echocardiogram if necessary. If there are still no vegetations, you have to think in terms of other causes of fever, and almost the infective endocarditis is excluded. So even if the vegetations are small, not picked up during the first 1 week after the fever, it should have grown in size and it should have produced a larger mass which should be easily detectable by echocardiogram. So transesophageal echo, repeat transesophageal echo in a patient with suspected endocarditis if it's present. If it is absent, then it almost rules out infective endocarditis. This is a patient with a bicuspid aortic valve. You can clearly identify the bicuspid aortic valve. There are masses over the aortic valve, and which are about 2 to 3 millimeters in size. There are multiple masses, mainly over the posterior cusp of the aortic valve. There are some masses over the anterior cusp also, and it is protruding into the left ventricular outflow tract. What is the additional finding in this patient? So can you identify this one? Look at the mitral valve. Whenever you have an aortic valve endocarditis, look at the mitral valve. The anterior mitral leaflet at this region where I am pointing out, there is a small tag of tissue over the anterior mitral leaflet. So whenever you see this, you have to be very careful to interrogate the mitral valve carefully by zooming over the mitral valve. So any patient with aortic valve endocarditis, the infected blood can fall over the anterior mitral leaflet and can produce mitral valve endocarditis also and produce complications due to the infective endocarditis. So these are called Kiss lesions. So you have to identify these Kiss lesions in any patient with aortic valve endocarditis. How will you confirm it? See this one, close-up zoomed view. You can clearly identify the tag of tissue or the maybe a mass of infected material also. With the color Doppler, you can clearly identify the aortic regurgitation, and there is a perforation over the anterior mitral leaflet with the significant mitral regurgitation. So if you miss this one, the patient goes for surgery, then the mitral regurgitation may be missed, and the patient might have to be reoperated at a later stage. So in any patient with aortic valve endocarditis, have a close look at the mitral valve to see whether it is secondarily affected due to the aortic valve endocarditis. The basic disease is obvious. This patient has got a rheumatic mitral valve disease, and there is a large mobile mass over the anterior mitral leaflet due to infective endocarditis. You can clearly see there is a mobile mass with ruptured cardiac tendinae to the anterior mitral leaflet, and there is significant mitral regurgitation in this patient, severe mitral regurgitation. So how will you identify vegetation? Usually vegetations have row reflectance. It is attached to the valve on the upstream side. It is irregular in shape and amorphous. Usually it is soft, and it usually has an independent mobility. Apart from the valve movement, it has got an independent mobility, and it is associated with tissue changes, valve destruction, perforation, or ruptured cardiac tendinae, or either fistula formation. All these things are present associated with infective endocarditis and vegetations. Usually it is of row reflectance, but when the patient is being treated with antibiotics and all that, after 4 to 6 weeks, the vegetations may become more bright because they are because of healing of the vegetation. There is fibroblast formation inside the vegetation itself, and it becomes more bright. So if you see a brighter mass which is attached to the valve and showing independent mobility, it is likely to be a treated case of mitral valve vegetation. So this is again another patient with aortic valve endocarditis. It is a larger mass which is attached to the aortic valve. The aortic valve was a tricuspid aortic valve. Here you can see the tricuspid aortic valve. And here again, the patient was having a severe mitral regurgitation, severe aortic regurgitation. This is the apical long axis view. And the apical 5-chamber view with the color, you can clearly identify the severe aortic regurgitation. So this is the aortic regurgitation. The one which we see here below is an artifact. This is a patient with infective endocarditis of the tricuspid valve. This is commonly present in patients, drug users, or after septic abortions, etc. This is a patient with septic abortion. You can see a large mass over the anterior tricuspid leaflet, and it is the anterior tricuspid leaflet is completely flailed, and the patient has got a severe tricuspid regurgitation. This is a patient with ventricular septal defect. The outflow type of ventricular septal defect, you can see the mass near the ventricular septal defect. There are masses over the free wall of the right ventricle also. You can see some mobile masses near the free wall. Inside the right ventricular outflow tract and also over the pulmonary valve, you can see the vegetations. So this is a patient with ventricular septal defect, left to right shunt. There is a vegetation near the ventricular septal defect over the anterior wall of the right ventricle and also over the right ventricular outflow tract and over the pulmonary valve. This is a continuous Doppler of the ventricular septal defect. This is another patient with ventricular septal defect. This is a perimembranous ventricular septal defect. There are dense masses over the left side of the right side of the interventricular septum, and there are masses over the tricuspid valve also. You can see the mass over the tricuspid valve also. So in addition to producing vegetations over the ventricular septal defect, the jet has hit against the left, say, tricuspid valve, and it has produced multiple masses over the tricuspid valve also. In the color, you can see the systolic flow across the ventricular septal defect. This is another patient with a tricuspid valve vegetation. You can see the anterior mitral leaflet. There is a vegetation over the anterior mitral leaflet. And you can see again, there is a tissue which is extending from the sinuses, aortic sinuses, into the right atrium. And it is showing some cavity inside. This tissue itself is filled with dense echoes. And the aortic valve also shows some masses. So this is a patient with aortic valve vegetation, vegetations over the ruptured aneurysm of sinus valsalva, and vegetation over the tricuspid valve also. You can clearly see the windsock-like appearance of the ruptured aneurysm of sinus valsalva. Only thing is the windsock is not empty. It is filled with dense vegetations. This is a patient in whom there is a masses inside the pulmonary artery and also over the pulmonary valve. The masses are attached to the pulmonary artery. The cause is actually patent ductus arteriosus. This is a PDA with left to right shunt. So this patient has got infective endocarditis, or it is often called as infective endarteritis of the pulmonary artery. But here there is an involvement of the pulmonary valve also. So there is infective endocarditis of the pulmonary valve with vegetations over the pulmonary valve. There are vegetations inside the pulmonary artery in a patient with patent ductus arteriosus. So this is the flow diagram for identifying the diagnosing infective endocarditis. First, do a transthoracic echo. If it is positive, say, or even negative, if there is a clinical suspicion, you can go ahead with a transesophageal echocardiogram. If the suspicion is low, then we can stop with transthoracic echocardiogram itself. If the suspicion is high, it is always better to do a transesophageal echocardiogram. In a prosthetic mitral valve, especially if there is suspect any infective endocarditis, it is better to do a transesophageal echo, especially for a patient with mitral valve prosthesis. It is often a little more difficult to diagnose by transthoracic echocardiogram, and a transesophageal echocardiogram is especially useful. So this is a patient with prosthetic valve endocarditis. You see the say disc processes moving. There is a dense echo in the region of the disc valve, but we are not able to clearly identify the masses. And when we did the continuous ray Doppler, the gradient was markedly increased. And you can clearly see when we do the transvisible electrocardiogram, you can clearly identify the mass. These are the masses present over the valve. So only thing is this has to be differentiated from thrombus. So this patient was having fever, etc. So the mass has to be diagnosed as left atrial, infective endocarditis of the prosthetic valve. If the patient is say otherwise there is no fever, if the INR is diminished, it is below normal, then you have to think in terms of thrombus occurring over the prosthetic valves. This is a patient with aortic valve endocarditis and dehiscence of the valve. You can see a large mass over the posterior portion of the aorta, and it is moving freely, and there is a significant aortic regurgitation, and there is a gap between the suture ring and the posterior wall of the aorta. There is almost complete dehiscence of the ring of the prosthetic valve. This is a patient with a pacemaker. You can see the right ventricular pacemaker lead inside the right atrium and also into the right ventricle. There are masses over the tricuspid valve and also over the pacemaker lead. It is producing significant regurgitation also. So this is a patient with pacemaker leads present inside the right ventricle and the right atrium, and there are infective endocarditis of the tricuspid valve, because the tricuspid valve hits against that pacemaker leads again whenever there is closing, and it produces denudation of the endothelium of the tricuspid valve and forms a nidus for the development of infective endocarditis. This is a post-operative patient. A patient has been operated for ostium secundum atrial septal defect with a patch closure. After the patch closure, there's developed a large mass inside the right atrium and the left atrium. You can clearly identify. You can also see that the mass is invading the interatrial septum. You can see the mass is present here. There is another mass which is present here, and it is invading the interatrial septum. So this was an unfortunate patient who had a fungal infection after surgery, and the patient actually succumbed to the infective endocarditis. Infective endocarditis also can occur in synovial heart diseases. You shouldn't miss it. This is a patient with, you can see a large mass over the aortic valve. You can see the mass over the aortic valve, and also you can see masses over the tricuspid valve. So this is a patient with infective endocarditis occurring in a patient with tetralogy of Fallot, producing vegetation over the tricuspid valve and also vegetation over the aortic valve. And this is a patient with detransposition of great vessels. You can see the posteriorly placed pulmonary valve. You can see the posterior course of the pulmonary artery. You can see the posterior, the pulmonary cusp is doming, indicating that the patient has got pulmonary valvular stenosis. This jet has hit against the pulmonary artery and it has produced vegetations inside the pulmonary artery. These are the vegetations which are present inside the pulmonary artery. Okay, I will again play it. Here you can see the pulmonary artery vegetation. In a patient with detransposition of great vessels and severe pulmonary stenosis, there is a ventricular septal defect also. This is a rare case. Here, if you see here, this is the aorta, and you can see this is the right coronary artery which is coming off from the aorta. The right coronary artery is markedly dilated. The left coronary artery is normal. And you can see a flow which is going through the dilated coronary artery, and it is actually coming posteriorly along the interatrial septum and enters the right atrium. And it hits against the eustachian valve. This is the inferior vena cava. This is the eustachian valve. And you can see that jet is falling over the eustachian valve, and it has produced vegetation over the eustachian valve. I'll make it play again. So this is the dilated right coronary artery, which is coursing posteriorly like this. And this is the jet due to the AV fistula, coronary AV fistula. And this is the vegetation over the eustachian valve. Next, we'll deal with cardiac masses, thrombus. All of you must have seen a number of patients with thrombus. Thrombus, usually it is due to some predisposing features. This is called a Virchow's triad. There is damaged endothelial surface. There is a low velocity blood flow inside the chambers and increased viscosity and coagulability of the blood due to some pathological condition. So these are the three conditions which may be present in patients with a thrombus inside the cardiac chambers. So this is a patient in whom there is a akinetic contraction of the interventricular septum. The entire septum is akinetic, typically due to a myocardial infarction, anterior wall myocardial infarction. The left ventricular apex is again akinetic, and there is a large mass inside the left ventricular apex. This patient actually came with gangrene of one of the fingers. He was a policeman. He came with gangrene of one of the fingers. And when we did the echo, there was a large mass near the left ventricle. This patient actually underwent the left ventricular repair procedure. A Dacron patch was placed here, excluding the thrombus and restoring the shape of the left ventricle. And also patient underwent a CABG. This is a patient with a pseudoaneurysm. A pseudoaneurysm is usually due to a rupture of the, say, left ventricle. This is an inferior wall infarction with rupture of the inferior wall. This is the left ventricular inferior wall, which shows the echo dropout. And this is a large collection of blood inside the pericardium. And you can see clots inside the pseudoaneurysm. You can see the to and fro flow from the left ventricle into the pseudoaneurysm. You can clearly visualize it in the apical views also. In the four-chamber view, it is not visualized. The patient has significant mitral regurgitation due to tethering of the posterior mitral leaflet. And in an off-axis view, you can clearly identify the pseudoaneurysm. A large mass, global hypokinetic contraction, dilated cardiomyopathy with a large left ventricular thrombus. You can see the large mass. It is attached to the left ventricle. The attachment is not clearly made out in this view. Now you can identify clearly the attachment to the left ventricular apex. In addition to this large mass, there is another mass near the left ventricular apex. So there are multiple thrombus inside the left ventricle in this patient with dilated cardiomyopathy, very severe LV dysfunction in this patient, systolic dysfunction. This is another patient with left ventricular dysfunction. This mass has got echolucent appearance. This is not a thrombus. This is usually a blood cyst. Whenever you see a cystic echo inside the left ventricle or over the mitral valve or over the tricuspid valve, you have to think in terms of a blood cyst. So this is a blood cyst which is present inside the left ventricular apex in a patient with left ventricular dysfunction. When we are not able to clearly identify the thrombus in patients with myocardial infarction, you can see there are some dense echoes near the left ventricular apex. If you are not sure about the presence of left ventricular thrombus near the apex, then you can do what is called a left ventricular contrast echocardiogram. So we inject a few milliliters of contrast, which is to clearly make out the thrombus by the contrast. Usually Definity or Sonoview is used for the contrast. It passes through the right ventricle, it passes into the right ventricle pulmonary artery and goes through the pulmonary circulation, appears on the left side and fills the left atrium and left ventricle. And you can clearly see there is an echo-free area, that is contrast-free area, which is identified. And this is the left ventricular thrombus, which can be confirmed by using the contrast echocardiogram. This is a patient with mitral stenosis in whom there is a dense echoes present inside the mitral valve. This is actually little more than the spontaneous echo contrast which we see in patients with rheumatic mitral valve disease. This is almost a sludge. Whenever you see spontaneous echo contrast or sludge-like echoes inside the left atrium, you have to carefully search for left atrial thrombus. Maybe you have to do, in addition, left and say transesophageal echocardiogram to exclude any thrombus inside the left ventricle. A transesophageal echocardiogram especially is very useful in patients with rheumatic mitral stenosis. Here you can identify a small mass inside the left atrial appendage. So this is the left atrium and the left ventricle. This is the left atrial appendage thrombus in a patient with rheumatic mitral stenosis. Most often, 75 to 80% of the times, we can identify the thrombus by transthoracic echocardiogram itself. In about, say, about 15 to 20% of the patient, we need a transesophageal echocardiogram, especially to diagnose a thrombus present inside the left atrial appendage. This is another patient with rheumatic mitral valve disease with a large thrombus inside the left atrium. You can see the mass is present inside the left atrium, almost filling half of the left atrium. There is a mass inside the left atrial appendage also. This is another patient with left atrial mass. This mass is mobile. This patient has got a rheumatic mitral valve disease, a single large mass which is moving inside the left atrium. This is a typical appearance of a ball valve thrombus. It is actually moves and it goes towards the orifice, tries to close the orifice, and it is bounced back. So this is a ball valve thrombus in a patient with rheumatic mitral valve disease. This is another case of ball valve thrombus. A transesophageal echocardiogram. You can identify there are 3 balls, and the 2 ball thrombi are moving. You can see one large one, another small one. This one is attached to the intra-atrial septum. This is attached by a thin pedicle, and anytime this also may get moving. So this there are multiple thrombus inside the left atrium with 2 ball valve thrombi and another thrombi which is attached to the left atrial wall. This is another patient with severe mitral stenosis, who has undergone a closed mitral commissurotomy. There is a spontaneous echo contrast present inside the left atrium, and then you can see the left atrial appendage. It is completely empty. It is empty. But in the same patient, if you do the transesophageal echocardiogram, you can see mass inside the pulmonary artery. So this is the main pulmonary artery, right pulmonary artery. So there you can see, identify the masses inside the pulmonary artery. This is the pulmonary artery is cut across the short axis. You can see thrombus inside the right pulmonary artery in a patient with rheumatic mitral valve disease. This is another ball valve thrombus. You can clearly see the mitral valve. The mitral valve is moving normally. There is no mitral stenosis in this patient. The only thing is this patient has got atrial fibrillation. So this patient has got atrial fibrillation, which has produced a thrombus inside the left atrium, and the stalk has been given way, and the the left atrial thrombus has become mobile. This is a patient with endomyocardial fibrosis involving the right ventricle. You can see obliteration of the right ventricular cavity and very narrow right ventricular cavity, markedly dilated right atrium with autocontrast, and a thrombus inside the right atrium. There is mild involvement of the left ventricle also with mitral regurgitation. And this is a patient with thrombus inside the right ventricle. You can identify this thrombus inside the right ventricle, and it is present inside the right atrium. You can identify the masses inside the pulmonary artery. This was actually a young lady who was affected by chikungunya fever and was bedridden for 1 month. Because of the immobility, she has developed thrombus in the cough vein, which has got discharged, and it has produced a pulmonary thromboembolism. You can clearly see the mass inside the right atrium and the right ventricle. And you can see the mass inside the inferior vena cava. It is coming from the inferior vena cava. And also you can identify the masses inside the pulmonary artery. So this is the pulmonary artery. You can see mobile masses inside the pulmonary artery. So this patient, we did a thrombolysis. In spite of thrombolysis, the patient actually succumbed to the pulmonary embolism. And this is a transesophageal echocardiogram in a patient with thrombus. You can see clearly this is the left atrium and this is the right atrium, the interatrial septum, and through the patent foramen ovale, a linear mass, a tadpole-like mass is trying to enter the left atrium. The left atrial mass also is a significant one. Say this is a cut along the short axis, so it looks like a small one. But if you go to the long axis, 130 degrees long axis, it is a large one. Anytime this can get discharged and it can produce a stroke. So this is a patient with a thrombus in transit. A deep vein thrombus which has come to the right atrium, crossing the left interatrial septum through the foramen veil, and it is producing a left atrial thrombus also. You can identify the linear mass in the long axis view. So this is 130 degrees long axis view from the mid-esophagus. This is a patient with actually in constrictive pericarditis. The pericardium is thickened. You can see the mitral valve motion itself is abnormal. You can identify multiple echoes in the region of the pericardium, and there is a mass inside the right atrium, and it is extending into the right ventricle. Here you can identify it is floating inside between the right atrium and the right ventricle. It was actually got entangled in the cardiac antennae and the tricuspid leaflet, and this was proved to be tricuspid valve thrombus in a patient with constrictive pericarditis. This is another patient. You can see transesophageal echocardiogram. This is left atrium and the right atrium. Right atrium is dilated and there is a thrombus inside the right atrium. There are a spontaneous echocontrast present inside the right atrium. There is calcification of the right ventricular apex, and also there is mild tricuspid regurgitation. So this is a typical patient with endomyocardial fibrosis, a burnt out endomyocardial fibrosis involving the right ventricle with calcification and markedly dilated right atrium. There is a mild involvement of the mitral valve and the left ventricle also. There is a mild mitral regurgitation due to mild mitral valve involvement. And if you see carefully the, say the 45 degrees and the bicaval views in the short axis in the transesophageal echo, you can clearly identify the mass is arising from the right atrial appendage. This is the superior vena cava and this is the right atrial appendage. The mass is attached to the right atrial appendage and it is extending into the right atrial cavity. This patient was severely cyanosed due to a right-left shunt across the interatrial septum here. For the patent foramen veil, there was a shunt from the right atrium into the left atrium. You can see the contrast echo, contrast filling the right atrium, crossing the interatrial septum through the patent foramen veil, coming into the left atrium. This is a patient with prosthetic mitral valve. Here you can see one disc, another disc. So I'll play it again. This disc is completely stuck and this disc is very slightly mobile, and you can see dense echoes over the mitral valve. So in this patient, the patient had some significant gradient. You can see it is 38 and 24 with a significant pulmonary hypertension, and the patient was in atrial fibrillation. So this patient we thrombolized, and this is the picture after thrombolysis. After actually 3 days of thrombolysis, the flow was restored. You can see the thrombus has almost completely dissolved. You can see normal movement of both the discs of the mitral valve, and the gradient has decreased to 9 and 3. The peak gradient is 9 and the mean gradient is 3. So this is how echo can be very useful to diagnose prosthetic valve thrombus, and immediately you can give thrombolytic therapy and the patient is completely cured. Only thing is, if when the thrombus burden is a large one, in 10% of the patients, it can produce sequelae in the central nervous system. Lastly, we will come to the cardiac masses due to pseudomasses and artifacts. And this is a patient with lipodystrophy. When it is mild one, it should not be mistaken for lymphoma. The next one is, this is a patient with mass over the aortic valve, which is extending a linear mass. This patient is this type of dense echoes over the aortic valve, moving echoes, may be present in older people. So this is called Lambel's excrescences. It is a type of degeneration. It is similar to papillary fibroelastoma, degeneration of the aortic valve, producing this linear echoes. The only problem is sometimes it embolizes and produces central nervous system problem. And this is a mass present inside the left ventricle. So this one mimics left ventricular thrombus, but this is actually intramural hematoma, blood leakage into the in between the layers of the left ventricular muscle itself and producing intramural hematoma. Here in this echo, you can see a mass inside the right atrium, a bulbous mass here inside the right atrial wall. And this is often present in patients with a normal right atrium. This is due to a prominent crista terminalis, which is normally present in the people. In some people, the crista terminalis is very prominent, and this should not be mistaken for a mass due to a thrombus or tumor. This is again another mass near the region of the tricuspid annulus. So you can see a mass over the mitral annulus also. So these are actually masses of fat. So this is a mitral annulus fat and tricuspid annulus fat, which is producing a dense echoes over the mitral valve. And this can be confirmed by MRI. You can see in the MRI, the fat produces as a distinct appearance, which can be clearly identified. So this is the mass in the region of the tricuspid annulus, mass in the region of the mitral annulus, and these are the AV groove adipose tissues. And this should not be mistaken for mass. So the indication for doing a transesophageal echocardiogram is class 1 in any patient in whom you are suspecting a clinical syndrome with a cardiac mass. In any patient when the underlying cardiac disease is known to predisposed to mass formation, for whom a therapeutic decision regarding surgery and anticoagulation will depend on the results of surgery, then it is a class 1. A follow-up or surveillance of studies after surgical removal of mass known to have a likelihood of recurrence, like a myxoma, it is a class 1 indication. Patient with known primary malignancies, when echocardiographic surveillance for cardiac involvement is part of the disease staging process, it is class 1. Screening persons with disease states likely to result in mass formation, but for whom no clinical evidence exists, is class 2B, it may be done. Patients for whom the results of echocardiography will have no impact on the diagnosis or clinical decision making, it is a class 3, it need not be done. So with that, we finished this echo portion. I will show you the 5 echoes which we have done it as a part of the quiz, and we will discuss the thing. So this is actually a vegetation over the anterior mitral leaflet, which is showing independent mobility. The patient has got a basic heart disease, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. There is marked hypertrophy of the interventricular septum, entire interventricular septum, and there is systolic anterior motion of the anterior mitral leaflet. Because the anterior mitral leaflet is hitting against the septum, it produces the endothelial is denuded, and it forms an nidus. So in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you can get vegetations over the anterior mitral leaflet. Sometimes they have described vegetation over the left side of the interventricular septum in the region where the anterior mitral leaflet hits against the septum. And with the color Doppler, you can clearly see the left ventricular outflow obstruction and also significant mitral regurgitation. With the continuous Doppler, you can clearly diagnose the dagger-shaped appearance of the left ventricular outflow obstruction. So this bright echo in the continuous Doppler is due to the mass hitting against the continuous Doppler. And this case is the thrombus in transit. This is a deep vein thrombus which has moved into the right atrium, trying to cross the patent foramen veil, and it has crossed into the right atrium. So this is a thrombus in transit in a patient with deep vein thrombus. And there is a mass over the posterior mitral leaflet in the region. This is a typical appearance of a patient with posterior mitral annulus calcification. Usually it is irregular, but sometimes it can be rounded like this. And this may be mistaken for a mass. This round mass can have echolucencies inside. This echolucency is usually due to deposition of fat inside the posterior mitral annulus into the posterior. Sometimes this fatty infiltration can actually rupture and produce say mobile echoes. So posterior mitral annulus has to be considered whenever there are dense echoes in the region of the posterior mitral valve and the posterior mitral annulus. This is a typical appearance of left atrial myxoma. The only thing is the last portion of the picture. This is left atrial myxoma because there is a large mass. It is attached to the interatrial septum. The only thing is there is a mass inside the right ventricle also. The left atrial mass is mobile, large one. There is a mass inside the right atrium also. So this patient has got a left atrial myxoma and a right atrial myxoma. Whenever you see a myxoma, you search for another myxoma in the right atrium also. So this is a biatrial myxoma with left atrial myxoma, large one, but it is mobile, producing obstruction of the mitral valve. The right atrial myxoma is sessile and it is not moving at all. And of course, this is easy. This is a patient with anterior valve myocardial infarction. The basal portion is spared. You can see wall motion abnormalities in the left ventricular apex and the lower 2/3 of the interventricular septum. There are masses with echolucency and dense echoes. This is a fresh thrombus which has formed in a patient with acute anterior valve infarction. There is wall motion abnormality, the LV posterior wall also. This is due to an old inferior valve infarction. So this is old inferior valve infarction, anterior valve myocardial infarction with masses inside the left ventricular thrombus. The nature of the mass is a thrombus. So you can give yourself and assess how much you have learned from the webinar. So I should thank our colleagues from the Institute of Cardiology, Madras Medical College, all the professors, assistant professors who have worked with me and who have sent their cases for echocardiogram, and the postgraduate and also the patients without whom we would not have this amount of educational material for us to learn. Thank you.
Wonderful, sir. That was a wonderful presentation.
I'll share my video also now. Okay.
I know we would like to see you. Suddenly everything went dark, so I knew that there was a power failure.
So that's okay.
So I'll read a couple of questions because we were already, I know if we had given you 2 days, even then your cases would have not finished. You have so many in stock. I am reading 1 or 2 questions. Dr. Vinod Vijan, he is stuck in US, and after India government is done with Vijay Mallya, we should get Vinod Vijan also back to India. He is from Nasik. The role of ELASQ or a fibroscan for the tissue characterization, does it help in tumor assessment or cardiac masses?
No, I am not sure. So it's useful in liver for say fat infiltration and all that. In breast, it's very useful. The elastics,
okay.
I don't know whether it is useful in the cardiac masses.
Perfect, sir. So let him stay in US. Okay. Now, now they wanted to know, how do you differentiate, what are the characteristics of myxoma, which would make it different from other tumors of the heart?
Okay. The myxoma usually is present inside the cardiac chambers. The commonest one is the left atrial myxoma. Any mass inside the left atrium, which is attached to the interatrial septum, should be considered as a left atrial myxoma. If it is not attached to the left atrium, then we have to think in terms of other possibilities also. Any left atrial or right atrial mass which is attached to the interatrial septum at the level of fossa vallis should be taken as a left atrial myxoma unless proved otherwise. In the case of ventricular masses, you can usually say that it's likely to be a myxoma. The final diagnosis rests upon removing the tumor and, as I say, studying the pathology. The mass itself doesn't have any typical echocardiographic features, especially ventricular myxoma. The attachment, etc., from which you cannot diagnose the mass as a myxoma.
So, Aisha Siddiqa wants to know what type of masses can invade pulmonary veins and the superior vena cava and enter the heart.
Say any secondary metastasis inside the lung can invade the heart through can invade the pericardium, it can invade the myocardium, it can go through the pulmonary veins. because say how the metastasis occurs. Usually it is through the lymphatics and the veins. Say they are the one which take the metastasis from one place to another place. So if you have a melanoma in the foot, it travels through the veins, and the first thing it comes to is the atrium. So atrial metastasis is the one which is common in a melanoma. We have seen one of the conferences, they have shown a large mass inside the right atrium. When they removed it and cut it, it was a black mass. Obviously, it was a malignant melanoma which has spread into the atrium. Like that, any mass anywhere in the body can spread to the other organs like liver, lungs, brain, etc. And also it can extend into the heart. It can extend through the veins or through the lymphatics, and by adjacent spread. It is present over the lungs. From lungs, because of the contiguity, it spreads to the pericardium and myocardium, and also it enters the cavity.
We want some tips to differentiate vegetation from a tumor. This comes from Galaxy A10.
Vegetation and a tumor. So the important thing, whenever you see a mass, you have to see whether what is the type, apart from identifying the masses, etc. We have to go through the clinical history. So the important thing in a vegetation is we have to have the clinical features of infective endocarditis. We have to say the patient whether he is having fever now or he has fever which is prolonged, and whether the vegetation is there over the leaflets, whether it has produced some destruction of the leaflet. Usually a tumor doesn't produce a destruction of the leaflet, unless rarely myxoma can produce the damage to the anterior mitral leaflet because it hits against the mitral valve. So, very rarely it produces fistula formation or tear in the mitral leaflets, perforation, etc. So when destruction of the leaflets with associated complications, we have to think in terms of vegetation. And the nature of the mass itself will not be very large one. Say usually it's about 10 millimeters, or larger ones maybe about 20 millimeters. So like that, especially if the vegetation is due to infective endocarditis due to staphylococci, they are usually virulent, and they are usually small ones and produces lot of destruction. The staphylococcal vegetation, it produces destruction of the valve and produces significant regurgitation. So main thing is the clinical features, the destruction of the valve. In case of prosthetic valve, it produces dehiscence of the valve. And never a prosthetic mitral valve, say if you have a prosthetic mitral valve, a prosthetic mitral valve thrombus can produce obstruction of the valve or regurgitation of the valve or both. But it never produces dehiscence of the ring. So if you have a dehiscence of the ring in a patient with a mass over the prosthetic mitral valve, always you have to think in terms of infective endocarditis producing masses. So the clinical picture is one of the things which gives you the clue.
Okay, Dr. Shahrukh Golwala wants to know that what are the indications and when do we do surgery in fibroelastoma?
Fibroelastoma is an indication for surgery because if it is present over the mitral valve, aortic valve, it is highly mobile. It is it has got a significant mobility, and it is usually attached by a thin thin pedicle and all that. Anytime it can embolize and it can produce significant neurological deficit. So the presence of fibroelastoma usually is an indication for surgery, either over the mitral valve or over the aortic valve. If it is present on the right side, then you may leave it because it may at the most embolize to the lungs. So, but if it is present on the left side, it's usually an indication for surgery.
There's a bigger question that role of cardiac MR in cardiac masses.
The role of CT and MR is mainly for, it is not going to be that much useful to visualize the cardiac mass. So the cardiac mass itself is very well visualized usually by the transthoracic echo and transesophageal echo. When you suspect there is a mass in the lungs or somewhere else, then CT or an MRI will be very useful, especially a CT. If you are suspecting say secondaries of the lung, which is spreading to the, say, heart. Or if you suspect the patient has got cancer lung with the secondaries inside the heart. So, or if you think there are secondaries inside the liver. So in all these cases, for finding out the associated findings, especially CT is very useful. For identifying the mass alone, it's not going to matter whether say there will be no additional clue which you can get by doing CT or an MRI.
Dr.
Except
Sohail
except maybe in when there is a fat infiltration, MRI will give specific appearance for the fat. That's the only thing.
Dr. Sohail wants to know which one is more common, rhabdomyoma in children or metastatic tumors in adulthood?
It's two separate entities.
Both are different, and fortunately, rhabdomyomas we see plenty in pregnancy, and they are associated with tuberous sclerosis. That's the concern. Rhabdomyomas, many of them, more than 60%, 70% of them would disappear in about a month's time. Rest of them would disappear in a year or 2 years' time. There is all of their own because they are dependent upon the hormones to thrive. And but the issue is not rhabdomyoma. Issue is something else. Issue is the tuberous sclerosis and tumors in the brain, which can produce intractable epilepsy.
Yes, and also they are mentally retarded. That's going to be
absolutely. That's another one.
Yes.
Which tumors? Dr. Sohail again wants to know which tumors, metastatic tumors, are common. I think you already showed in the presentation.
That's what metastatic tumors are 20 to 40 times more than the primary tumors. The metastatic tumors have the malignant melanoma, cancer breast, cancer lung, lymphoma. So all these things metastasize to the heart. So except for the brain tumors, any other tumor anywhere over the body can metastasize.
So the Pratishka wants to know, doctor, that papillary fibroblastoma, Lambel's excrescences, and aortic vegetations. What are the tips to differentiate between these three things? Again,
you have to take into account clinical features. So usually the papillary fibroblastoma and Lambel's excrescences occurs in otherwise normal persons. Usually they are 60, 70 years old. There is some calcific spots present over the aortic valve itself. And there are some linear echoes or mobile echoes over the aortic valve. So usually due to degenerative process, you can clearly identify them. If you ask me if there is an additional vegetation, how to identify, then it's going to be very difficult. But usually all the Lambel's excrescences have got that linear tongue-like protrusion, like which one happens into the LV outflow tract during diastole. So usually that is a typical appearance of a Lambel's excrescence. Whereas fibroelastoma, usually anemone appearance, usually irregular, showing mobility by itself. So that is a typical appearance in patients with papillary fibroelastoma.
So the question is, cardiac lymphoma, are they chemo-sensitive? But I think I would be more interested to know, are the lymphomas radiosensitive? Because are they chemo and radiosensitive, sir? The cardiac lymphomas, like usual lymphomas?
I'm not sure about that thing, but usually I've not seen a patient with Hodgkin lymphoma which is metastasizing. Usually the other types of lymphoma, usually they are present inside its lungs, and also I have seen cases of extending into the heart and all that. But when it involves the heart, then it is going to be a difficult problem because it destroys the tissues of the heart. The one case which I showed you, actually we followed him up to it is almost completely eaten away the right atrial wall, the tricuspid annulus, etc. And the patient succumbed to his disease in spite of chemotherapy and all that. So I'm not sure whether the lymphomas are radiosensitive or not.
Can we suspect sarcoidosis on echo?
There are definite features for sarcoidosis. for suspecting sarcoidosis in the echocardiogram. But often this has to be again confirmed by doing magnetic resonance imaging or by doing a PET CT scan. So these two additional investigations are usually necessary for confirmation. Usually suspect patient to have a cardiac sarcoidosis. A cardiac sarcoidosis typically produces thinning of the ventricle. Especially there is a basal interventricular septum is thinned out in patients with sarcoidosis, typical. Or it can be middle portion, it can be over the anterior wall, it can be over the left ventricular, apex. So usually the one sarcoid which has lasted for a few months or years produces thinning of the wall of the ventricles. So whenever you see thinning of the wall, always think in terms of sarcoidosis. That is the one which you'll advise. In say echo, you suddenly see a portion of the left ventricular wall. There is a thinned out and that thing is not moving or it's producing an aneurysm. The basal portion of the septum is completely thinned out in a patient with otherwise no myocardial infarction. There is no myocardial infarction in which the basal portion is affected without the middle and lower portion getting affected. Usually if the basal portion is affected by infarct, then it should involve the lower and middle and lower portion also. So a basal portion alone is getting thinned out is not usual presentation in patients with myocardial infarction. So the first thing is thinning. The second one is arrhythmias. So if the patient has got complete heart block, if the patient presents with ventricular tachycardia, so or some other type of arrhythmia, always think in terms of sarcoidosis, especially a patient, young patient presenting with ventricular tachycardia. Always do a CMR in that patient. So there are a number of patients in whom the echo looks almost completely normal or it is not very specific for any other thing. Even if it is completely normal, in a young patient with ventricular tachycardia, you have to do a CMR to exclude sarcoidosis. If you follow this principle, most of the cases we can diagnose it.
Okay, so there is some correction from Dr. Suhail who wants to know his question is rhabdomyomas are more common in children than metastatic tumors in the children?
Yes. Rhabdomyoma is the commonest tumor in children.
Okay.
Are not that common in children.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I would have to take an apology because there are so many questions, and I'll just request sir to give me. I'll just read out few at random questions. One of the question which many of them they want to know is a little more detail about blood cyst.
Blood cyst.
And
yeah. Cyst, that's a very rare mass. Only a few cases we have seen. I have seen one. This actually is one from some other institution which they have clipped, which I have given actually. And they have described the blood cyst. Actually, Dr. Jacob Jose has described a case in our I think Indian Heart Journal. He has published it. Left ventricular blood cyst producing dysfunction, etc. From CMC Vellore, he has published it. I have seen a patient with a cyst over the mitral valve. So, which was a blood cyst, which we have diagnosed, and it was the patient was operated. And in a quiz competition, usually in our IAE meeting, they showed a tricuspid valve blood cyst in one of the quizzes, which I missed actually, which I did not diagnose. I was participating in the quiz, but so the blood cyst is the one which we have to keep in mind always when you encounter a cystic echo in the mitral valve, aortic valve, or in the left mitral valve, tricuspid valve, and also in the left ventricle.
The last question I would read out is that how do we confirm vascularity in the tumor? Is it a contrast echo which is better, or can we do with the color Doppler also?
Color Doppler is one of the mobility for suggesting, but if you want to be definitely sure about the vascularity, it is better to do a contrast echo. So that will be better. Suppose if you want to say mass inside the ventricle, you want to differentiate between thrombus and tumor, do a contrast echo. The tumors will be having a blood supply, so the tumor mass will become brighter. Whereas usually a thrombus usually doesn't become bright with when you inject the contrast echo.
Yeah, Dr. Chandrasekhar has commented that you can use a contrast in a perfusion mode.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Yes, sir.
And you know, a lot of people have shared their email and applauded you, sir. And the reason of sharing their email is they want that if you could manage the presentation to them. So I'll leave it to Philips and Indresh and Ranjit to, you know, take from here. I think it was an excellent presentation, and that's why we never knew how the time went.
Absolutely, sir. Indeed, I think this is an excellent presentation, and the rarest rare cases that we got an opportunity to see that. And it's a thank you very much, sir. I think it's a great honor, and it's an opportunity for us to host you as a for the speaker. From behalf of entire Philips team and all the participants today attended. So it's a great thanks to you, sir.